Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In this one we're going to be reviewing how to edit items inside a collection in an MVVM app in MAUI. So we're going to get started by taking a look at our user interface. I'm working with a project that I have already built, and we were going to start by reviewing the user interface. So here's our XAML page, and what I've got is a grid with 4 rows. In the first row, I've created a layout that we can use to update one existing item. We've got a label for display, there are 2 entries, and a button. When we click the button, we're going to take the values from those 2 entries and submit it as new values for the selected item that we're trying to update. In the second row, I've got an edit button. So we're going to use this button to select and choose which element we're going to be editing. So in the third row is our collection view. This is going to show our list of items. The way the flow is going to work is the user will select one of the items in the collection view and then click the Edit Selected Invoice button. From there, the values will populate into the entries up here. The user can make their changes, click on the Update button, and those updates will replace the existing selection with the new values, thereby updating the collection view. Behind this, we've got an invoice collection view model. And in our view model, we've started out with an observable collection of invoices. In the view model's constructor, I've just generated a few dummy invoices that we can use to populate our collection. Just as a refresher, we'll take a look at the invoice item class. So in invoice item, we've got 3 properties here: description, quantity, and price, as well as a toString method that will display those values for us in a nice human-readable format. So let's get started. We're going to start on the XAML page, making sure that all the data bindings are updated. So I've already got our item source for our collection view bound to our invoices collection. And in our data template, you'll see that I've assigned the data type to be one invoice item. So the entire collection view shows our collection of invoices, but inside the item template, we're showing just one invoice item. So inside my label, the binding dot, the dot points to one invoice item element. And when we put it into a label, it will use the invoice item's toString method to convert that into a string. So before we get going on the rest of it, we're just going to run it and take a look at what this thing looks like when it's running. So here's our app in its current state. We've got the update form up here at the top, an edit selected invoice button, and our list of our 3 invoice items that we generated at the beginning of our view model. So in here, our invoice items are showing up in the collection view. Now right now I don't have the ability to select any of the items because we don't have a selection option set up inside the collection view. So that's going to be one of the first things that we do. Once we select an item, then we want our edit button to be available. When we click on the edit button, the item's description will show up over here. We don't want to be able to edit that, but we'll be able to edit the price and quantity in these 2 entries, followed by a click on update. In the demonstration that we did in class, we transferred control to a new page to perform the edit. So this demo is just going to show you a slightly different way of performing the same sort of action, where everything is going to take place on this one page. Because of that, it's really important to be able to control which controls are available at any given time. For example, the text boxes and the update button right now probably shouldn't be available because we haven't yet selected an invoice. We want to be able to click on one of these and then click on the edit button. So we'll do a little bit of work to control those UIs, as well as the functionality of actually having our updates stored in the collection. So let's get to work. We'll just stop the app, and we're going to work first in our XAML page. So we need to be able to select one of the invoices. I'm going to add a property to my collection view for the selected item. So the selected item is going to need to be stored in the background of the app, that is in the view model, so that we can keep track of which invoice that we're trying to edit at any given time. So I'm going to bind my selected item to let's call it selected invoice property. Now we'll need to remember to create this property on the collection view model after the fact. We also want to set the selection mode to single. In this case, we only want to be able to edit one thing at a time, so we'll make sure that we can just select one single option in the collection view. Now I'm going to go back into our view model and create the selected invoice property. So we'll make an observable property that represents one invoice that is our selected invoice. We want to use lowercase here so that when the property is generated, it generates a property with a capital letter. So the capital S, selected invoice, will match up here with this binding. The next step in our process here is being able to take that selected invoice and decide that that's the one we want to edit. So on our XAML page, we want to be able to click on this edit button, and that's what causes the invoice to populate our edit form up here. So I'm going to add a command to this button, and this button command is going to be bound to a command in our view model, and that command in our view model is going to take the selected invoice and fill out these form properties with its values. So we're going to set it again to a binding to a command that we then have to go and write in the background. So we'll create a command called edit selected invoice command. The name of the method that we write is going to be called edit selected invoice, and then marking it as a relay command is going to tack that word command onto the end. In our view model, we're going to write that relay command that matches up. So we're going to make a method called edit selected invoice. Now, in order to populate these fields, we have two options here. We could take our currently selected invoice item and use its properties to fill out the bindings for the label and the two entries. And that will work as far as populating the labels and the entries. But unfortunately, when we get to the point where we want to submit the changes, that process is going to break down. And the reason why it would break down is because inside invoice item, description, quantity, and price are not observable properties. So that means if we change them, there will be no notification that a property has changed in the UI. So when we submit those changes, the UI will not know, it will not update, and the changes will not be displayed on the screen. So our other option is we want to bind these texts to a specific observable text property. So I'm going to create some text properties specifically for this purpose. We're going to bind to description property for the description, to quantity, and to price. Now, if we remember what our binding context is, our binding context is the view model. So these three properties are not coming from invoice item. They've got to come from our invoice collection view model, the same place that we've written all these other properties and commands. All of these bindings come from the same view model. And if you're wondering where the view model has determined its binding context, it's over here in the code behind for this page. So in our invoice collection C#, we're using dependency injection to specify that we have invoice collection view model as this page's binding context. So we're going to go into our view model and create description, quantity, and price properties that we can use to fill these three controls. So we'll have observable property for description, quantity, and price. I just pasted them in here. Description, quantity, and price. Now, when we click on the Edit Selected Invoice button and we go over into this command, we want to populate these three properties with the values from the selected invoice. So we can go to the selected invoice property, grab those values, and fill them out into these properties here. So we're going to have description matching our selected invoice description, and the same for quantity and price. And we want to make sure that we're using the uppercase. Visual Studio wants to autocorrect you on that. You got to not let it. Use your uppercase. If it autocorrects, just go back and edit that. We want our quantity property, not the local field. If you're having a hard time with this, sometimes saving the file can help, because saving generates the code behind and makes our IntelliSense kind of catch up with us. So we're going to make sure that we're always accessing the uppercase properties for quantity and finally for price. Assigning these local fields to those values will ensure that we're using observable properties to work with our entries and our labels. At this point, we'll test out the app and make sure that those are being populated when we click on that button. So as my app loads up, our goal is to be able to click on one of these items, click on Edit, and the three item properties are populated up here. So we've got the description, item B, we've got 18 as the quantity and 25 as the price. Now our UI could use a little bit of work. For example, we want to make sure that this edit button is not available until you have selected something in the list. So we can add those pieces in. Same goes for this update button. When we write the code for that, we want to make sure that you can't update until you have filled out both of these fields. So we're going to be using the can execute method along with the notify can execute changed, so that when the properties here change, the button responds. So first we'll do the edit selected invoice button. We want to say that this button is not available until you have selected an invoice from the collection view. So when I add on the can execute option, we're going to use a method that says an invoice is selected. And now we've got to write this method. To determine whether an invoice has been selected or not, we'll make a Boolean method. And this method's job is going to be to determine whether selected invoice is null. So if selected invoice is not null, invoice is selected will be true. When invoice is selected is true, this command can execute. Now, as the selected invoice changes, we need to make sure that our edit selected invoice command also updates. So we're going to add this piece into our observable property that says notify can execute changed for the name of our edit selected invoice command. So our edit selected invoice command will have its can execute changed when selected invoice changes. And that's what we're expecting to control that button. So here's the app. The edit selected invoice button is not available. When I choose an invoice, and I can click edit now, when I go to edit, the values populate up here. Now let's work on the update button. In our XAML page, this update button here, when you click on it, is going to go to a command that replaces the selected invoice with a new invoice with the new values that we've entered into these three bound properties. So I'm going to add a command here that points to a binding, and then we'll have to write the binding on the other side. The binding in this case is going to say submit changes command. And that means we're going to have to write our method on the other side called submit changes. So let's go into our view model. and we'll write the submit changes command. Creating the method, and this method's goal is to create a new invoice from the description, quantity, and price properties, and then replace the previous invoice with this new one. Now we have a few options as to whether or not this command can execute. The command can only execute if you fill out the entire form. That means you have to enter a number for the quantity and you have to enter a number for the price. So we're going to have a different condition here for the update button. The update button is only available when quantity and price are both greater than 0. So we're going to write the method that controls that. We'll call it valid values this time. And we're going to say that valid values mean that quantity is greater than 0 and also price is greater than 0. Our submit changes command can only happen when we have valid values. Now, the valid values method depends on quantity and price. So that means when quantity changes or when price changes, we need to reevaluate whether or not that command can execute. So again, we use notify can execute changed for and put in the name of our command. We have submit changes command as the name of it. Again, if the IntelliSense is a little slow, try saving your file. That should rewrite the code in the other part of this partial class, and eventually this will end up going away. Let's copy this. We'll apply it to the price property as well. Our submit changes method is going to create a new invoice with the data from the input form, and then replace the existing selected one with this new one. We have to replace because just updating the properties on an invoice is not good enough. Those invoice properties are not observable. In an observable collection, the method to add or remove or insert into this observable collection raises an event called collection changed. But changing the properties of one item inside that collection does not raise that event. So let's create our new invoice item. Created a new invoice item, and in here we're using our local description and passing that as the description property for the invoice item. We're doing the same thing for quantity and for price. So we'll just line these up down here. Now this can be a little bit confusing. It looks like you're assigning something to itself, but the way that these property assignments work is that this is our local variable, in this case our description property, and the one on the left is the name of the property in the object. So we're saying that this new invoice items description is being assigned to the value of the description property here, that one is bound to our text box. So there's our new invoice item, and we want to replace the existing selected invoice with this new one. And one thing that you think you might want to do but can't is this. If we say selected invoice equals our new item here, this will reassign the value that selected invoice is pointing to, but it doesn't raise any collection changed events on the collection. In fact, this statement doesn't reference the collection at all. So that means our collection view will not be updated if we write this. So let's get this out of here, and we want to find the item in our collection and replace it. So I'm going to use the index to find the item. There are other ways. You can use link or you can use other find methods and things like that. But what we're looking for is the selected invoice, find its index in the collection. So invoices is our collection. We're going to find the position of the existing selected one. And if that exists, we're going to change our invoices at that particular index to point to our new item instead. Don't need these brackets. And finally, we can make sure that once the changes have been submitted, that we clear out the form, clear out the selections, so that our page is back in its original state where nothing is selected and nothing is being edited. So I'm going to reassign these values for description, price, and quantity back to their defaults, and we'll set selected invoice to null to clear out the selection in our collection view. So let's test it out, make sure everything's working appropriately. So here's the app as it has loaded. You can see the update and the edit buttons are both grayed out as I haven't selected anything yet. When I select an item from the list, I have the option to choose to edit that item. We'll click on edit, and that opens up our update option. So I can't change the description, but I can change the quantity or the price. So if I change the quantity, say to 5, or I can change the price to $2.50, and we can click on the update button to submit those changes. So we've got now 5 as the quantity and $2.50 as the price. So in this demonstration, we've looked at a couple of things. First and foremost, we've looked at how to edit an item in an existing collection, and that involved selecting a particular item, populating the fields in the form, and then gathering and making the changes with the new data. We also looked at enabling and disabling commands based on different conditions. So I hope you found this video helpful, and I will see you in the next one.